Working on a traction engine which is similar to a Minnie, Part 1, the overview. This is a bit of a curiosity as it looks similar to the popular Minnie design but is quite different in many ways. It was given to me by a kind viewer from Scotland. In this episode I look at the parts that arrived in a very well made wooden box. There were one or two other parts in the box, namely a 5/16 by 32 water gauge and some other interesting bits and pieces. In this first episode I'm just looking at the parts that were in the wooden box, starting with one of the front wheels. At first I thought, well, the colour of these wheels is a bit odd, but the more I looked at them, the more I saw the reason for it. The wheels are made from steel and riveted together with copper rivets. Having a closer look, the workmanship is very good indeed. Traction engine wheels are something I've never had an inclination to ever want to make. Looking at the skill, the time and the effort to make this front wheel, it really is quite amazing. The tyre is riveted to the wheel using copper rivets and plenty of them. In the box with the engine was a bag of nuts and bolts, and here they are. I've tipped them out onto the bench. And if you think making a front wheel for a traction engine is difficult, take a look at the rear wheel. Each of these bars, called strakes, are riveted in place with 2 copper rivets. The riveting is not 100% perfect. This is something I would never even attempt. Here's the other wheel with its nice centre hubcap. The hubcap for the other wheel is not fitted. It's in a plastic bag. This is a very small traction engine, not as small as a Mammoth, but all of the fixings that are used on this engine are very tiny. Look at the work involved in making this chimney. It's rolled up from a piece of copper sheet which in turn is riveted, then it has a brass cap and a brass fitting at the bottom. Very nice indeed. This engine though is not quite what it seems. This for instance is a dummy brake drum. It's for appearance only. The engine has no mechanism to operate a braking system. The standard of workmanship on this engine is very high indeed. In this shot you can see the bunker water filler and part of the bunker and one of the gears. This is the main drive gear fitted to the axle. The gear is held in place on the axle using one slot-headed bolt. Not a brilliant idea from a strength point of view, but at least there is a detent drilled in the axle to accept the screw. Are these commercial gears for a Minnie? No, they're not. I've mentioned many times in quite a few videos that my father always said to me, if you want to teach yourself patience, tip a load of nuts and bolts out onto the bench and then put them back in various drawers relative to their size. I'll be doing this very shortly. I see that there is a spare steering chain because the original one is broken. I learnt a lot about traction engines from working on the large showman's engine that I used to have. And one thing I found interesting was the way that the axles were secured to the wheels, just with a pin like this through a hole in the end of the axle. And the only thing that stops the pin from falling out is the centre cover. In this clip you can see the centre cover that's been removed from one of the wheels. I put all of the parts, including the spare steering chain, back in the plastic bag. And now, get ready for it. An exercise in patience training. Don't worry, I'm not going to show all of this in real time. I need to sort out all of these nuts and bolts. Some are brass, some are steel. I tried using a magnet to pick them up, but I found this to be slower than doing it this way. Take a handful of nuts and bolts, sort them out and put them in the respective boxes. Most of these nuts and bolts are 6BA size. BA stands for British Association. It's a very popular thread form in model engineering. It is, by the way, not metric, but nearly metric. This is running at 400%, and look how tedious the job is. I'm sorting out the 6BA stuff first. It took a while, but it's sort of easy on the brain, I don't know why. And eventually I have 2 categories, 6BA assorted and 8BA and smaller. These 2 drawers are out of my racking unit in the workshop that's built onto my kitchen. Time now, I think, to look at the rest of the engine. I'm starting with the cab. As with the wheels, the parts are very well made. The water gauge is missing, but I have some of those up in the main workshop. The firehole door is especially neat. and by using the firing iron, the firehole door was very easy to open and close. I can't do it by hand because my hand does not fit in the cab. The cab floor is not up to the same standard as the rest of the engine, so I've removed it and I'll use it as a pattern to make another one using thicker metal. It would also look very good if I put some mahogany duckboards on top of the new piece of metal. I'll show more about that in a later episode. I changed the camera angle. Have a look at the primary drive gears from the crankshaft to the first gear. They are quite different to normal gears. You don't see these very often. I wonder where they came from. Possibly out of a piece of military equipment. I used to have some parts from a World War II bomb sight apparatus, and this also had bevel gears, although they were smaller than these. Most of the workmanship on this engine is outstanding, but it is a bit strange in one or two areas. For instance, look at the double cogwheel on one side of the 2-speed gear drive. Also think the gears are possibly made from brass, which is not the best thing to use, as it's nowhere near as strong as steel. As I was poking about in this area, I kept catching my hand on the end of a shaft. Here's the shaft in the foreground. It's actually the steam regulator control, which is a bit unorthodox. I fitted a disc cutter into my Proxxon motor tool and removed the sharp end of it. Being very careful to control the position of the cutter and not allow it to slip. And as you can see, I didn't mark the brass either. This is much better. No longer will I catch my fingers on the sharp end. Here's another close-up view in the cab. That firehole door is quite something. The water pump is a bit of a strange affair. The ball valves from the pump are situated inside the bunker tank. This is most unusual. Normally, the ball valves are part of the pump. Upon closer inspection, there's a bit of a problem with the crankshaft. I'll go into this in more detail in a future episode. There's nothing to stop the crankshaft from moving from side to side, and if that happens, the crank web actually hits the bulkhead. I'm going to modify this arrangement as it's not good at all. All the bearings on this engine are very dry, so I'm putting a stop to that by applying oil to everything that moves. And that concludes part 1. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.